Thank you. Wonderful. I'm not going to spend too much time giving a long, drawn-out speech. I'll just point out some facts regarding the most recent effort by the Ohio Republican Party and national Republican leaders to disenfranchise voters right here in the Buckeye State. As all of us know, several 100,000 Ohioans are newly registered this year in anticipation of voting for President of the United States. We believe, as the Secretary of State has pointed out, of the over 700,000 new registrants here in the state of Ohio, more than 200,000 could be at risk for being disenfranchised if the Republican-led effort to seek the federal court's ruling that would reinstate a district court order that requires the Secretary of State to provide the names of new registrants whose registration information doesn't, quote, match the DMV's database to county boards. The federal law at issue, HAVA, the Help America Vote Act, requires the Secretary of State to match any new registrant's information from the statewide voter registration database against the Bureau of Motor Vehicles and Social Security Administration's records and take note of any mismatches. In other words, information that cannot be confirmed by the records that these agencies have. So when a new registrant's data is received from the county boards of elections, the Secretary of State electronically conveys the voter's registration information to the B&V, including their first name, their last name, their date of birth, the driver's license number, and the Social Security number. The B&V, the Bureau of Motor Vehicles here in the state, then matches the information on the registration card to the data in its own system. It then sends the information to the Social Security Administration, which in turn also tries to verify the information. So what could be wrong with that? Friends, I've been an elected official now since late 1992. My name typically appears on the ballot as Chris Redfern. My legal name is Christopher R. Redfern. That's the name that appears on my Social Security card. Additionally, on my driver's license, it is the same. If I were a newly registered Ohio voter today, or yesterday, or through the course of the summer or the spring, my registration card would be kicked as a mismatch with my B&V and Social Security number. Don't use me as an example. Let's use, oh, I don't know, the Speaker of the Ohio House, John Husted. Because right now, John Husted's voter registration does not match the name that is on his B&V and or Social Security card. I'd invite you to go to the Montgomery Board of Elections and check for yourself, it's my understanding. Or we could travel up the road a piece to Holland, Ohio and meet our new friend, Joe Wurzelbacher, better known as Joe the Almost Plumber. By the way, in Ohio you have to be licensed to be a plumber. But nonetheless, Joe is registered under the name Wurzelbacher with a U. I'm sorry, it's an O. Because of his poor handwriting, when Joe filled out the voter registration card, he used an O. Or the Board of Election in Lucas County thought it was an O and wrote the name down with an O. Joe's legal name is with a U. In fact, his legal name is Samuel Joseph Wurzelbacher. But if you were to go to Lucas County today, it appears as an O. He's a registered Republican. He's been registered to vote in Lucas County and voted in the primary as a Republican. Under these circumstances, my registration, under the circumstances as described by the Ohio Republican Party and their friends at the national level, and the ruling they begged from the appellate court to uphold Judge George Smith's temporary restraining order, as well as his indication to the Secretary of State that those mismatches must be made, those comparisons must be made, and those mismatches must be identified. John Husted, myself, and Joe the Plumber, our names would be thrown out as registered voters. Now, could the local boards of elections or the Secretary of State intervene? Most assuredly they could. In the case of John Husted or myself, I assume they would. I know who the boards of elections members are. As a county commissioner, I appointed some of those employees in my capacity as a county commissioner. But unfortunately, the 700,000 new Ohioans who registered to vote aren't the Speaker of the House. They aren't the chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party, and most of them don't or aren't Joe the Plumber. So here we are. John Husted, Chris Redfern, and Joe the Plumber could be at risk under the most recent frivolous lawsuit filed by the Ohio Republican Party. Kevin DeWine and Bob Bennett have asked that the federal courts make available to the public those names so that then the Ohio Republican Party could, and certainly will, in Cuyahoga County and the top 25 Democratic leaning counties will, go after those mismatches and beg the courts and the Secretary of State's office to remove those would-be voters from the rolls. Because as you know, if the names don't match up, then there's certainly voter fraud. How many times have we heard voter fraud in the last couple of weeks? As if Acorn volunteers are running amok here on the grounds of the State House searching for individuals to lead down the primrose path of voter fraud. There have been 3 prosecuted cases of voter fraud in the state of Ohio in the last 10 years. Voter fraud and voter, having been a member of the Ohio 9 years, I know that when we pass laws, we expect county prosecutors to enforce the law. Thus far, county prosecutors have enforced the law 3 times with 3 convictions. In terms of voter registration fraud, it is no different from going to a Cleveland Browns game and being approached by an individual giving away free t-shirts if only you fill out a credit card application. We've been to airports and to ball games when we've been asked to fill out these applications. There's something in America called credit card fraud. Filling out a credit card application to get a free t-shirt and writing down Tony Romo or Mickey Mouse. You could be prosecuted under federal law, federal credit card fraud law, but you aren't, because there are individuals in place and regulations in place to catch these kinds of behaviors. In the case of Ohio's voter registration laws, the bipartisan county boards of elections are in place to verify that those who register to vote are legally allowed to vote. No different than those boards of elections who are required when a petition of statewide matters are presented to the county boards of elections. They are charged with ensuring that those who have signed the said petitions are in fact registered voters. And from time to time, I know, hold your breath, some people may write down fictitious names on those very petitions. That doesn't suggest that those behind the petition gathering are somehow involved in some nefarious activities in trying to perpetuate or demonstrate or create an election that is fraud. The Ohio Republican Party and their friends in Greene County, for instance, and spread across the state and the nation, are in the process, in the midst of trying to disenfranchise voters. This I know, because if they weren't, Kevin DeWine would be standing next to me urging that John Husted's name be thrown from the rolls in Montgomery County and that he would be disenfranchised as a voter. I wouldn't expect Kevin to do that because he knows better. Those 700,000 voters who registered from January 1st through today, or through September 30th, October 6th rather, their vote and those voters matter. So if it's one single mom in East Cleveland, or a business owner in Batavia, or a plumber, or an apprentice plumber, or a hopeful plumber in the west side of Toledo, if they want their votes to count, we're going to stand up for and with them to make sure their votes do count. The fact of the matter is that George Smith, who by the way, his son is, I believe, the acting executive director of the Republican Party here in Franklin County, if they want to continue with the help of the federal courts to disenfranchise voters, we'll stand up and point out this. Ohio's voter laws, voter registration laws, were last updated a couple of years ago under the penmanship, the authorship of Kevin DeWine and John Husted. They passed a flawed bill. Democrats tried to intervene and change that bill, but that bill was signed into law by Bob Taft. Ironically now, the Secretary of State is now given the task of enforcing this crafted legislation, this poorly crafted legislation. Jennifer Bruner cannot make up rules as she goes. She has to enforce the Ohio Revised Code, and the Ohio Revised Code does not allow for names to be purged in the way that the Ohio Republican Party want them to be purged. And that is the point of my gathering here today.